The cold was the first thing Yuna felt when she woke up. It was not the normal cold of a winter morning. This was the kind of cold that went deep into bones and made every breath feel like swallowing ice. She tried to move her fingers, but they would not listen to her. Her whole body felt heavy, like someone had filled her blood with frozen water. She remembered the crash. The ion storm had come out of nowhere, tearing through space like an angry beast. The ship had screamed as it fell. She remembered fire. She remembered screaming. She remembered the faces of her crew members as the hull broke apart around them. Now there was only silence and snow. Yuna was a doctor. She had trained for 15 years to heal people. She had worked on space stations and colony ships. She had treated every kind of injury and sickness that existed in the known galaxy. But none of that training had prepared her for this. None of it had prepared her for being alone on a frozen world with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small medical kit strapped to her belt. The planet was called Velrith 7 in the Galactic Union's records. It was marked as a primitive world, home to a species that had not yet developed space travel. The rules were clear about such planets. No contact. No interference. Wait for rescue and stay hidden. Yuna laughed at that thought, and the laugh turned into a cough that shook her whole body. Stay hidden? She could barely stay alive. She had survived the first week by finding pieces of the crashed ship. There was food in some of the storage containers. There were blankets and tools and emergency supplies scattered across the frozen landscape. She had built a small shelter from the wreckage, covering it with snow to keep the wind out. But the second week brought a blizzard that lasted for 3 days. When it finally stopped, her shelter was gone. Her supplies were buried under mountains of white. And Yuna was dying. She walked because walking was the only choice. If she stopped, she would freeze. If she sat down, she would never get up again. So she walked, one step after another, even as her vision blurred and her legs grew weak. The Valkyrie hunting party found her on the 43rd day. She did not hear them coming. One moment she was alone in the endless white, and the next moment she was surrounded by tall figures with gray fur and amber eyes. They stood on 2 legs like humans, but everything else about them was different. Their faces were like wolves with long snouts and sharp teeth. Their bodies were covered in thick fur that seemed to laugh at the cold. Their hands had claws that looked like they could tear through metal. Yuna fell to her knees. She had no strength left to run or fight. She could only look up at these creatures and wait for death. The largest of them stepped forward. His fur was darker than the others, almost black, and his eyes held a kind of intelligence that surprised her. He looked down at her for a long moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he could not solve. Then he made a sound. It was not quite a bark, not quite a growl. The other Valkyrie responded with sounds of their own. They were talking, Yuna realized. They had a language. One of the younger hunters moved toward her with his claws raised. The dark-furred one stopped him with a single gesture. More sounds passed between them. The younger one did not look happy, but he stepped back. The dark-furred Valkyrie knelt down in front of Yuna. Up close, she could see the scars on his face and the gray hairs around his muzzle. He was old, she thought. Old and powerful and used to being obeyed. He reached out one clawed hand and touched her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle. He felt her skin, her hair, the shape of her ears. He tilted his head to one side, and Yuna saw something in his amber eyes that gave her hope. Curiosity. He stood up and gave an order. 2 of the hunters moved forward and lifted Yuna off the ground. She tried to protest, tried to walk on her own, but her body had given up. The darkness came for her, and she did not fight it. She woke up 3 days later in a dwelling made of animal skin stretched over a frame of bones. A fire burned in the center of the space, filling the air with warmth and smoke. Yuna lay on a pile of furs, her body wrapped in more furs, and for the first time in weeks, she was not cold. She was also not alone. A young Valkyrie sat near the entrance, watching her. When he saw that her eyes were open, he made a sharp sound and ran outside. Moments later, the space filled with bodies. Valkyrie of all ages crowded around her, staring at her with expressions she could not read. The dark-furred elder pushed through the crowd. He knelt beside her and placed a bowl near her mouth. It was filled with some kind of soup, thick and warm and smelling of meat. Yuna drank. She had no pride left. She drank until the bowl was empty, and then she drank the second bowl he offered her. When she was done, she looked up at the elder and tried to speak. "Thank you," she said. He tilted his head at the strange sounds. Then he placed one clawed hand on his chest. "Roken," he said. It took Yuna a moment to understand. He was telling her his name. She placed her own hand on her chest. "Yuna." The elder Roken repeated the name slowly. "Yuna." He nodded, as if satisfied, and then he stood and spoke to the others. The crowd began to leave, though many of them looked back at her with suspicious eyes. The days that followed were hard. The Valkyrie did not trust her. She was strange to them, a creature without fur or claws or any of the things they valued. The hunters growled when she came too close to their kills. The mothers pulled their children away when she walked past. The young ones threw small stones at her and ran away laughing. She was given food, but only the scraps that no one else wanted. She was given a corner of a dwelling to sleep in, but it was the coldest corner, far from the fire. She was allowed to stay, but she was not welcome. Yuna did not complain. She understood. To these people, she was an outsider, a thing that did not belong. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. So she watched and learned. She learned that the Valkyrie lived in family groups they called packs. Each pack had a leader, usually the strongest and wisest member. Roken was the leader of this pack, and his word was law. She learned their daily routines. The hunters left at dawn and returned at dusk. The mothers tended to the children and prepared food. The elders told stories around the fire, their voices rising and falling in patterns that sounded almost like music. She learned some of their words. Simple things at first: food, water, fire, sleep. She pointed at objects and listened to the sounds the Valkyrie made, repeating them until she got them right. She learned that they had healers. An old female named Suri was the healer of this pack. She used herbs and prayers and techniques passed down through generations. The other Valkyrie treated her with great respect. And Yuna learned that the Valkyrie were not monsters. They were people. Different from humans in many ways, but people all the same. They loved their families. They protected their young. They laughed and argued and dreamed. She was still an outsider. She was still alone. But she was alive. And as long as she was alive, there was hope. Yuna looked up at the unfamiliar stars each night and waited for rescue that might never come. And she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could find a place in this strange new world. She did not know that her chance to prove herself was coming sooner than she expected. Taro was trouble from the day he was born. That is what the elders said about him. He came into the world howling louder than any cub before him, and he never stopped making noise after that. He was the youngest of Roken's grandchildren, the son of the elder's only daughter, and he had no fear of anything. This was not always a good thing. While other cubs stayed close to their mothers, Taru wandered. While other cubs played safe games near the camp, Taru chased real prey into the wild. While other cubs listened to the warnings of their elders, Taru laughed and ran the other way. Everyone knew that something bad would happen to him someday. They just did not know when. Yuna had been with the pack for 2 months when that day finally came. She had learned much in that time. Her vocabulary had grown from a few words to a few hundred. She could understand simple conversations, even if she could not speak perfectly. She had learned the names of most pack members, their relationships to each other, their roles in daily life. She had also learned to stay invisible. The Valkyrie still did not accept her. The stone throwing had stopped, but only because Roken had ordered it. The suspicious looks continued. The whispers behind her back never ended. Yuna was tolerated, nothing more. She did not mind. She had her medical kit, hidden beneath her sleeping furs. She had her knowledge, and she had time to observe, to learn, to prepare for the moment when she might be useful. That moment came on a cold morning when the hunting party returned with more than just prey. They carried Taru between them, his small body limp and covered in blood. The whole camp erupted into chaos. Taru's mother ran forward, her howl of grief cutting through the cold air like a knife. Other mothers grabbed their own children and held them close. The hunters stood in silence, their faces grim. Roken pushed through the crowd. He looked down at his grandson, and for the first time since Yuna had known him, the old elder looked afraid. What happened? He demanded. One of the hunters stepped forward. He followed us. We did not know until it was too late. An ice-horn beast caught his scent. We killed the beast, but not before. He did not finish. He did not need to. Everyone could see what the beast had done. Taru's left leg was shattered below the knee. The bone had broken through the skin in 2 places. A deep gash ran across his chest, from his shoulder to his hip, where the beast's horn had torn through fur and flesh. Blood soaked the furs the hunters had wrapped around him. Suri, the pack's healer, came forward. She was older than Roken, and she had been healing the sick and injured for longer than most pack members had been alive. She knelt beside Taru and examined his wounds with experienced hands. The pack watched in silence as she worked. They trusted Suri. She had saved many lives over the years. Surely she could save this one too. But as Suri continued her examination, her ears slowly flattened against her skull. Yuna had learned what that gesture meant. She had seen it before. When Suri looked at wounds she could not heal, it meant hopelessness. Suri stood up and stepped back. She turned to Roken and spoke quietly, but Yuna was close enough to hear. The leg cannot be saved. The wound on his chest is too deep, and the sickness is already spreading through his blood. I can give him herbs to ease his pain, but... She shook her head. I am sorry, Elder. There is nothing more I can do. Taru's mother collapsed to the ground. Her howl of grief was joined by others. The whole pack began to mourn for the cub, who was not yet dead. Yuna stood in her usual corner, watching. Her heart beat fast in her chest. Her hands trembled at her sides. She knew she should stay quiet. She knew she should follow the rules. No contact. No interference. Let nature take its course. But she was a doctor. She had sworn an oath to heal the sick and save lives. And she could see, even from where she stood, that Taru was not beyond saving. The infection could be stopped with antibiotics. The chest wound could be cleaned and stitched. The leg would be difficult, but not impossible. She had set broken bones before. She had saved patients who looked far worse than this small cub. The rules said she should do nothing, but the rules had not watched the mother howl over her dying child. Yuna made her choice. She walked forward, pushing through the crowd of mourning Valkyrie. They barely noticed her at first. She was invisible to them, a creature of no importance. But when she knelt beside Taru and reached for his wounds, everything changed. Snarls erupted from all around her. Hunters moved forward with claws raised. Taru's mother bared her fangs, ready to tear apart the strange creature that dared to touch her son. Yuna did not move. She looked up at Roken and spoke in her broken Valkyrie. I can help. I am healer too. Please, let me try. Roken stared at her. The whole pack stared at her. No one had ever seen anything like this before. The strange furless creature, the outsider who had no place here, was claiming she could do what their own healer could not. You? Suri's voice was sharp with disbelief. What do you know of healing? You have no herbs, no prayers, no knowledge of our ways. Yuna reached under her clothing and pulled out her medical kit. She opened it, showing the contents to the assembled pack. They did not understand what they were seeing. Syringes and bandages and bottles of liquid meant nothing to them. Different healing, Yuna said. My people have different ways. Please. The cub will die if we do nothing. Let me try. If I fail, you lose nothing. If I succeed. She looked at Taru's mother. If I succeed, your son lives. The silence stretched for a long time. Yuna could feel the tension in the air, the distrust, the fear of the unknown. Every instinct told these people to reject her offer, to let their cub die rather than trust an outsider. But Roken was not like other leaders. He had seen much in his long life. He had seen change and upheaval and things that others thought impossible. And he had watched this strange creature for 2 months, learning her ways just as she learned theirs. He raised one clawed hand. The hunters stepped back. The snarls faded. Even Taru's mother, though her eyes still burned with protective fury, did not move. Try, Roken said. Save my grandson, and you will earn a place among us. Fail, and... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Yuna nodded and turned to Taru. She worked through the night. The pack watched her every movement, their amber eyes reflecting the firelight. They did not understand what she was doing, but they watched anyway. First, she cleaned the chest wound with antiseptic. The Valkyrie flinched at the sharp smell, but they did not interfere. Then she stitched the wound closed with surgical thread, her fingers moving with the speed and precision of years of practice. The leg was harder. She had to clean out the infection first, cutting away the dead flesh that had already begun to rot. Taru whimpered in his unconscious state, and his mother nearly attacked Yuna twice. But Yuna kept working, setting the bone, as best she could, creating a splint from materials she had gathered over the past weeks. Finally, she gave him an injection of antibiotics. This was her greatest risk. She did not know how Valkyrie biology would react to human medicine, but she had no choice. Without the antibiotics, the infection would kill him within days. By the time dawn broke over the frozen landscape, Yuna was exhausted. Her hands were covered in Taru's blood. Her body ached from hours of kneeling on the cold ground. But she was done. Now we wait, she said to Roken. The medicine needs time to work. If his fever breaks by tomorrow, he will live. The pack continued their vigil around the wounded cub. They did not sleep. They did not eat. They only watched and waited and hoped. The next morning, Taru's fever broke. 2 days later, he opened his eyes and asked for food. 1 week after the hunters had carried his broken body into camp, Taru limped out of the healer's dwelling on his healing leg. He looked around at the gathered pack, and his weeping mother, and his proud grandfather. Then he walked to Yuna and pressed his small furred body against her side. Thank you, he said in his high, young voice. You saved me. Yuna knelt down and wrapped her arms around him. She did not have words for what she felt in that moment. She did not need them. Something had changed in the pack that night. Something fundamental. The looks of suspicion had not disappeared entirely, but they were joined now by something else. Respect, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of trust. The story of the furless creature who saved Roken's grandson spread like fire across dry grass. The Valkyrie had many packs scattered across the northern territory. They were connected by trade, by marriage, by ancient alliances that went back generations. News traveled between them through messengers and traders and the occasional gathering of elders. And this news was too strange to keep quiet. A creature from the sky. A being without fur or claws. A healer who could bring cubs back from the edge of death. At first, most packs did not believe it. The Valkyrie had their own healers, their own traditions, their own ways of treating the sick and injured. These methods had served them for thousands of years. The idea that some strange outsider could do better was insulting to some and impossible to others. But then the visitors began to arrive. The first came from the Ridge Pack, 3 days' journey to the east. A female named Hana carried her newborn cub in her arms, and the cub was dying. He had been born too weak to nurse. He could not latch onto his mother's body, could not take in the milk that would give him strength. The healers of the Ridge Pack had tried everything they knew, but the cub grew weaker every day. Hana had heard the story of the furless healer. She did not believe it, not really. But she was desperate, and desperate mothers will try anything. She arrived at Roken's camp with her cub wrapped in furs and her eyes full of fear. The pack watched as she approached Yuna, who was sitting near the fire with Taru at her side. "Please," Hana said. "They say you saved the elder's grandson. They say you have magic from the sky. Please, my son is dying." Yuna looked at the tiny cub in Hana's arms. He was so small, so fragile, barely breathing. She reached out and touched his fur, feeling the weakness in his body. "He cannot eat?" Yuna asked. Hana shook her head. "He tries, but he is too weak. The milk will not go in." Yuna thought for a moment. Then she stood up and began to gather materials. A piece of clean intestine from a recent hunt. A small container. Some cloth for filtering. The pack watched in confusion as she worked. They had no idea what she was doing, but they had learned not to question her methods. Yuna created a simple feeding device. She filled the container with Hana's milk, filtered through the cloth to make sure it was clean. She attached the intestine to act as a tube. And then she showed Hana how to use it. "Drop by drop," Yuna said. "Not too fast. Let him swallow. Then another drop. It will take time, but he will grow stronger." Hana looked at the strange device with doubt in her eyes. But she tried it anyway. And when her son swallowed the first drop of milk and did not choke, when he swallowed the second drop and then the third, tears began to fall from her amber eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." She stayed with Roken's pack for 3 days, feeding her son drop by drop, watching him grow stronger. When she finally left to return to the Ridge Pack, the cub was nursing on his own. Word of this miracle spread even faster than the first. The next visitor came from the Valley Pack. He was a hunter named Doru, and his arm had been caught in a trap meant for larger prey. The metal teeth had torn through his flesh and shattered the bones underneath. The healers of his pack had done what they could, but the wound had begun to rot. They told him he would lose the arm. Some said he would lose his life. Doru did not want to die. He had a mate and 3 cubs who depended on him. So he made the journey to Roken's camp, even though every step sent fire through his injured arm. Yuna examined the wound and saw what the Valley Pack's healers had missed. Small pieces of metal were still buried in the flesh, causing the rot to spread. She could see the lines of infection running up his arm toward his body. If she did nothing, he would be dead within a week. She worked for hours, cutting open the wound and removing every piece of metal she could find. She cleaned the rot away with antiseptic, ignoring Doru's growls of pain. She stitched the flesh back together and wrapped it in clean bandages. Then she gave him antibiotics, just as she had given Taru. "The rot will stop," she told him. "The arm will heal. But you must keep it clean, and you must rest." Doru stared at his bandaged arm. He had expected to lose it. He had expected to die. And now this strange, furless creature was telling him he would recover. Why? He asked. Why do you help us? We are not your people. We are not even your kind. Yuna thought about the question. It was a good question. She had asked it of herself many times over the past weeks. Because I can, she finally said. Because healing is what I do. Because when I see someone in pain, I want to make the pain stop. That is enough reason for me. Toru looked at her for a long moment. Then he dipped his head in a gesture of respect that Yuna had never received from anyone except Roken. Thank you, Yuna of the Sky People, he said. I will not forget this. The visitors kept coming. An elder from the Frost Pack, racked by a coughing sickness that had already killed 3 members of his pack. Yuna recognized the symptoms of a bacterial infection in his lungs. She had been cultivating mold from the local environment, testing it, experimenting with it in secret. She was not sure it would work, but she tried anyway. The elder recovered. The sickness stopped spreading. An entire pack was saved. A young female from the Stone Pack, her belly swollen with pregnancy, but something wrong inside. The healers had said she would die in childbirth, that the cub was positioned wrong and could not come out. Yuna examined her with gentle hands and understood the problem. She knew a technique, a way of turning the cub inside the womb without cutting. It was risky. It was difficult. But she had done it before. The female survived. The cub survived. Both were healthy. With each healing, Yuna's reputation grew. And with each healing, the resentment of the traditional healers grew as well. Suri was the first to confront her. The old healer came to Yuna one evening when most of the pack was asleep. Her amber eyes were hard, her voice cold. You make us look like fools, Suri said. Every time you heal someone we could not heal, you tell the world that our ways are worthless. That we are worthless. Yuna had been expecting this conversation. She had seen the anger building in Suri's eyes for weeks. That is not what I want, Yuna said carefully. I do not think your ways are worthless. Your herbs are powerful. Your prayers give comfort to the sick. Your knowledge has kept your people alive for generations. Then why do you do what we cannot? Why do you succeed where we fail? Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. Come, she said. Sit with me. Let me show you. She began to teach. She started with simple things. How to identify the signs of infection. How to clean wounds properly, not just with water, but with substances that killed the invisible creatures that caused rot. How to set broken bones so they would heal straight and strong. Suri listened. At first, she listened with suspicion and doubt. But as the lessons continued, as she began to understand the reasons behind Yuna's techniques, her expression changed. These invisible creatures, Suri said one night. You truly believe they exist? Things too small to see, living in wounds and making people sick. I know they exist, Yuna said. My people have seen them. We have tools that make small things look big. These creatures are everywhere. In the water, in the air, in our bodies. Most of them do nothing. Some of them help us. But some of them cause sickness and death. Suri thought about this for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. This explains much, she said. Why some wounds rot and others do not. Why some sicknesses spread from one person to another. We always thought it was spirits or bad luck or the will of the ancestors. But if there are creatures, then you can fight them, Yuna said. You can kill them before they kill your people. The first time Suri successfully treated an infected wound using Yuna's techniques. She saved the life of a young hunter who would have died under the old methods. She stood over her patient, watching him sleep peacefully, and she turned to look at Yuna with new eyes. You could have kept this knowledge to yourself, Suri said. You could have remained the only one who could do these things. That would have given you power. Why did you share it? Yuna smiled. Because knowledge is not power when you keep it locked away. Knowledge is power when you share it, when you teach it, when you help others learn. I will not be here forever. Someday, rescue may come, or I may die. But if I teach you, if I teach others, then the knowledge survives. Your people will be stronger because of it. Suri reached out and placed her clawed hand on Yuna's shoulder. It was the first time any Valkyrie except Taru had touched her with affection. You are a strange creature, Yuna of the Sky People, Suri said. But I think perhaps you are also a good one. From that night forward, Yuna was no longer just a healer. She was a teacher. And the northern packs began to change in ways no one could have predicted. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Garam was the alpha of the Stone Pack, the largest and most powerful group in the Northern Territory. He had fought his way to leadership through strength and cunning and a willingness to do whatever was necessary. He was massive, even by Valkyrie standards, with shoulders as wide as two normal hunters and scars that covered his body, like a map of violence. He had built his power on the old ways. Strength ruled. The weak served the strong. Change was dangerous, a threat to the order that kept everything in its proper place. And now this order was being threatened by a small, furless creature who could not even survive a winter storm without help. Garan had watched the changes, spreading through the territory with growing anger. Packs that had once feared the Stone Pack were now talking about new healing techniques, new ideas, new ways of thinking. Hunters, who had once shown proper respect, now spoke of the Sky Healer as if she were some kind of spirit. Made Flesh thought it was unacceptable. He called for a gathering of alphas, something that happened only rarely when matters of great importance needed to be discussed. Leaders from every pack in the territory made the journey to the ancient meeting grounds, a circle of standing stones that had been sacred for longer than anyone could remember. Roken was there, old but still commanding respect. So were the alphas of the Ridge Pack, the Valley Pack, the Frost Pack, and a dozen others. They sat in a circle around the great fire, their breath making clouds in the cold air. Garan stood to speak first. That was his right as leader of the largest pack. Brothers and sisters, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I have called this gathering because I am worried. Our territory faces a threat, and too many of you are blind to it. He paused, letting his words sink in. The creature that fell from the sky has poisoned our people. She spreads strange ideas and stranger practices. She makes our healers doubt their own knowledge. She makes our young ones question the traditions of their ancestors. Murmurs rose from the gathered alphas. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. She has saved lives, one alpha said. My own nephew would be dead without her healing. And what happens when she dies? Garan shot back. Humans are fragile. We all know this. She cannot survive our winters without help. She has no claws, no fangs, no fur. Someday she will die. And what then? Our healers will have forgotten their craft. Our people will be helpless. More murmurs, louder now. Garan was not wrong to raise these concerns. The alphas had all thought about this in the quiet moments when they allowed themselves to doubt. Roken rose to his feet. He was smaller than Garan, older, slower. But his voice still carried the authority of an elder who had seen more than most. The human has saved lives, he said. She saved my grandson when our own healer said he would die. I do not see weakness in accepting knowledge that makes us stronger. Then, let her prove it, Garan growled. He had been waiting for this moment, planning for it. The trial of worth. Let her face it as any outsider must who wishes to join a pack. If she survives, she has earned her place among us. If she dies, He bared his fangs in what might have been a smile. Then, we will know the spirits have judged her. The alphas fell silent. The trial of worth was ancient, older than any living memory. It was meant to test whether an outsider was worthy of joining a pack. It involved tracking, survival, and combat. Tests that required speed, strength, and natural weapons. Tests designed for Volcari, not humans. "This is murder," Roken said flatly. "She cannot possibly survive the trial." "Then she does not belong among us," Garan replied. "The trial is fair. It judges all equally. If she is truly worthy, if her knowledge is truly valuable, then the spirits will protect her." The alphas looked at each other. Garan's logic was hard to argue with. The trial was tradition. Traditions had to be respected. And if the human passed, I accept. Every head turned toward the edge of the circle. Una stood there, wrapped in furs, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. She had followed Roken to the gathering, staying hidden until now. "I accept the trial of worth," she said again, her Valkyrie much improved from months of practice. "I will prove my value to your people in the way your traditions demand." Garan's eyes widened in surprise. He had expected arguments, protests, excuses. He had not expected acceptance. "You understand what the trial requires?" he asked. "Tracking, survival, combat. These are not things your kind is suited for. I understand. And you still accept?" Una met his gaze without flinching. "I do." Roken moved to her side. "Think about this," he said quietly. "The trial will kill you. Garan knows this. He's counting on it." "I know," Una said. "But if I refuse, I prove that I do not belong here. The doubt will never go away. The changes we have started will be undone. Everything I have built will be lost." She looked at the old elder with steady eyes. "I did not come to your world by choice, but I have chosen to stay, and I will prove that I am worthy of that choice." The trial began at dawn. The first test was tracking. Una was sent into the frozen wilderness with nothing but a knife, and told to return with the horn of an ice beast. These creatures were dangerous predators, large and fierce and difficult to find. Even experienced Valkyrie hunters sometimes failed this test. Una did not try to find the ice beast by following its tracks. She knew she could not match Valkyrie senses. Instead, she thought like a human. She found a watering hole and waded downwind, hidden beneath a pile of snow. She made a simple trap using her knife and some rope she had woven from plant fibers. She did not hunt the beast. She let the beast come to her. It took 2 days. 2 freezing, hungry days of waiting and watching and not moving. But when the ice beast finally came to drink, it stepped into her trap. The rope caught its leg and pulled tight. The beast fell, struggled, and exposed its belly. Una moved fast. She knew she only had seconds before the beast freed itself. She drove her knife into its throat, hitting the blood vessels she knew would be there. The beast thrashed and roared, but she held on. And finally, it stopped moving. She cut off its horn and began the long walk back to camp. When she arrived, the assembled packs fell silent. No one had expected her to return at all, let alone with a trophy. Even Garan looked shaken. The second test was survival. 3 days alone in the frozen teeth, the most dangerous region in the territory. Many Valkyrie had died there. The cold was extreme, the predators were many, and there was no shelter from the endless wind. Una survived by building. Humans had always survived by building. It was the one thing they did better than any other species in the galaxy. While other creatures adapted to their environments, humans adapted their environments to themselves. She built a shelter from ice and snow, using techniques she had read about years ago in survival manuals. She built a fire inside, carefully controlling the smoke so it would not suffocate her. She built traps for small prey and used every part of what she caught, Meat for food, fur for warmth, bones for tools. When the search party came to collect her frozen body, they found her alive and warm, roasting meat over a carefully controlled fire. The third test was combat. Duran had insisted on this. A fight against a champion of his choosing. And he had chosen himself. The packs gathered in a wide circle around the fighting ground. Yuna stood on one side, small and fragile, and without claws or fangs. Garan stood on the other, massive and scarred and confident of his victory. Last chance to withdraw, he growled. I will not kill you quickly. Yuna said nothing. She held her knife loosely in one hand and waited. Garan attacked. He was fast, much faster than something his size should have been. His claws slashed through the air where Yuna had been standing a moment before. But she was no longer there. She had moved, dodging to the side, letting his momentum carry him past her. He spun and attacked again. And again she dodged, her small size and flexibility letting her slip past his strikes like water flowing around a rock. Garan grew frustrated. His attacks became wilder, less controlled. He was not used to prey that would not stand still and fight. Yuna watched and waited. She studied his patterns, the way he moved, the openings he left after each attack. She remembered her training, the self-defense classes she had taken years ago on a space station far from here. And when Garan finally overextended, certain that this strike would end the fight, she moved. She did not try to hurt him. She knew she could not. Instead, she used his own strength against him. She grabbed his arm as it swept past her, redirected his momentum, and twisted. Physics did the rest. The great alpha of the stone pack found himself on the ground, Yuna's knife at his throat, her knee pressing down on his chest. The whole thing had taken less than a minute. I yield, Garan said, the words barely more than a whisper. Yuna stood up and offered him her hand. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached up and let her help him to his feet. How? He asked. You have no strength. No weapons. How? Yuna looked up at the massive alpha. My people are not the strongest, she said. We are not the fastest. We have no claws, no fangs, no fur to protect us from the cold. But we learn to think. We learn to adapt. We learn to use our enemy's strength against them. She paused. That is how we survived. And that is how we spread across the stars. Garan looked at her with new eyes. Not with friendship, perhaps, but with something that had not been there before, respect. The trial is complete, Roken announced to the gathered packs. The human has passed all 3 tests. By our own laws, by our own traditions, she has earned the right to live among us. The packs erupted into howls of celebration. Taru, now almost fully grown, pushed through the crowd and wrapped his arms around Yuna, nearly knocking her off her feet. Other Valkyrie followed, touching her shoulders, her arms, her face, accepting her as one of their own. Yuna looked up at the sky, at the stars that were just beginning to appear. She was no longer an outsider. She was Valkyrie. And somewhere, deep in her heart, she knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. 2 years had passed since the crash. Yuna no longer counted the days. She no longer watched the sky for rescue ships or listened for the distant sound of engines. She had stopped being a survivor waiting to be saved. She had become something else entirely. She had become Pac. The changes she had brought to the Northern Territory were everywhere now. Every pack had at least one healer trained in her techniques. The death rate from injuries and infections had dropped by half. Babies who would have died in their first winter now survived. Hunters who would have lost limbs to infected wounds now recovered fully. And it was not just healing. Yuna had taught them other things too. Better ways to preserve food for the harsh winters. Simple tools that made daily life easier. A system of writing that allowed knowledge to be recorded and passed down without relying on memory alone. The Valkyrie was still the same. People they had always been. They still hunted, still fought, still lived by the ancient traditions of their ancestors. But they were stronger now, better prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. Yuna thought about this as she sat by the fire in Roken's dwelling, surrounded by the pack she had come to love. Taro sat beside her, his fur pressed against her side for warmth. He was fully grown now, a strong young hunter who had earned his place among the adults. But he still came to sit with her every evening, just as he had when he was a wounded cub with a shattered leg. Suri was there too, the old healer who had once resented Yuna's presence. They were friends now, colleagues who shared knowledge and worked together to train the next generation of healers. Suri's methods had grown stronger with Yuna's additions, and Yuna had learned much from the old healer in return. Even Goran was present, which would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. The alpha of the Stone Pack had changed after the trial of Worth. He had not become friendly, exactly, but he had become respectful. He had seen what humans could do, and he had adjusted his thinking accordingly. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the cold night air. Someone was telling a story, an old tale about ancestors and heroes and great hunts. Yuna listened with half an ear, content to simply be present, to be part of something larger than herself. Then Taro's ears perked up. He lifted his head, sniffing the air. "Something is coming," he said. Others heard it too now. A strange sound, unlike anything the Valkyrie had ever heard before. A deep humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Yuna's heart stopped. She knew that sound. She ran outside, pushing past confused pack members, and looked up at the sky. There, descending through the clouds, was a ship. A human ship, with the logo of the Galactic Union painted on its hull. Rescue had come. The whole pack followed her outside, staring at the descending vessel with expressions of fear and wonder. They had heard Yuna's stories about the Sky People, but stories were different from reality. This was a monster made of metal, breathing fire as it came down from the heavens. The ship landed in a clearing near the camp, crushing trees beneath its weight. A door opened, and figures emerged. Humans in uniform, carrying equipment Yuna had not seen in 2 years. The leader stepped forward. He was a tall man with gray hair and a captain's insignia on his chest. "Dr. Yuna Kim?" he asked, his voice carrying across the frozen ground. Yuna stepped forward. "Yes." The captain's face showed relief. "Thank God. We've been searching for survivors from the horizon's edge for over a year. We detected your emergency beacon 6 months ago, but it took this long to locate you precisely." He paused, looking at the Valkyrie who surrounded them. Are you all right? Have they hurt you?" Yuna almost laughed. "Hurt me? No, they saved my life. They took me in when I had nowhere else to go. They're my family now." The captain looked confused. This was not the scenario he had prepared for. A survivor among primitive aliens was supposed to be a prisoner, a captive, someone in need of rescue, not someone who spoke of family. "Dr. Kim," he said carefully, "we're here to bring you home. The Union has a ship waiting in orbit. You can be back on Earth within a month." Home, Earth. The word stirred something deep in Yuna's chest. She had been born on Earth. She had family there. Or at least she had family there too, years ago. Friends, colleagues. An entire life that she had left behind. But as she stood there, looking at the rescue ship, she felt Taru move to stand beside her. His warm fur pressed against her side. His amber eyes looked up at her with concern. "Yuna?" he asked quietly. "What is happening? Who are these people?" She reached down and placed her hand on his head, running her fingers through his fur. "They are my people. she said in Valkyrie. They have come to take me back to the sky. The word spread through the gathered pack. Yuna is leaving. The sky people have come to take her away. Roken pushed through the crowd. The old elder looked at the human captain, then at Yuna, then back at the captain. She is not your prisoner, he said in broken human words that Yuna had taught him. She choose. Her choice. The captain blinked in surprise. He had not expected the aliens to speak at all, let alone to speak his language. Of course, he said slowly. Dr. Kim is free to make her own decisions. I'm simply here to offer her transport back to human space. He turned to Yuna. The choice is yours, Doctor. But I should tell you that your family has been worried. Your mother is still alive. She never stopped hoping you would be found. Yuna closed her eyes. Her mother. She had not allowed herself to think about her mother in so long. The old woman must have suffered terribly, not knowing if her daughter was alive or dead. She should go back. She should see her mother one more time. Let her know that she was all right. It was the right thing to do. But when she opened her eyes, she saw the pack gather around her. She saw the faces of the people she had healed, the hunters she had saved, the cubs who called her Aunt Yuna and came to her with their small injuries and troubles. She saw Suri, who had become her closest friend. She saw Garan, who had learned to respect her. She saw Taru, who had crawled to her side as a wounded cub and never left. She saw home. Captain, she said slowly, I appreciate you coming all this way. And I would be grateful if you could send a message to my mother, to let her know I'm alive and well. The captain nodded. Of course. And then we can begin the departure procedures. No, Yuna's voice was firm. I'm not leaving. This is my home now. These are my people. The captain stared at her. Dr. Kim, you can't be serious. These are aliens, primitives. You have no place here. With respect, Captain, I have more of a place here than I ever had on Earth. Yuna gestured at the gathered Valkyrie. These people saved my life. They accepted me as one of their own. I have taught them, and they have taught me. I have a purpose here. A meaning. She paused. I will not abandon them. The captain started to argue, but Roken stepped forward. She is Valkyrie now, the elder said. She faced the trial of worth. She proved herself to our people. She belongs to us, and we belong to her. Other pack members moved forward, surrounding Yuna, Taru, Suri, hunters and mothers and cubs. Even Garan stepped up, his massive form looming over the human captain. The northern packs protect their own, Garan growled. She is ours. We will not let you take her. The captain looked at the gathered aliens, at their claws and fangs and fierce amber eyes. He was not a foolish man. He knew when he was outmatched. I see, he said quietly. He turned to Yuna one last time. Is this truly what you want, Dr. Kim? Yuna looked at the pack. Her family. Yes, she said. This is what I want. The captain nodded slowly. Then I wish you well, Doctor. I'll make sure your message reaches your mother. He paused. The Union will probably send researchers eventually. People who want to study how a human integrated with an alien culture. I hope you'll welcome them. As long as they come in peace, Yuna said, they will be welcomed. The rescue team returned to their ship. The engines roared to life, and the vessel rose into the sky, disappearing into the clouds and then beyond. Yuna watched it go. Part of her, a small part, felt a pang of loss. The stars had been her home for so long. The vast emptiness of space, the countless worlds waiting to be explored. She had given that up to stay on one small planet, among one small pack of aliens. But then Taru pressed against her side, and Roken placed a clawed hand on her shoulder, and Suri smiled at her with warmth in her amber eyes. Come, Roken said. The fire is warm, and there are stories waiting to be told. Yuna smiled and let them lead her back to the camp. The pack settled around the fire once more. Someone picked up the story that had been interrupted. Laughter and conversation filled the cold night air. Cubs played at the edges of the firelight while elders dozed and hunters planned tomorrow's hunt. And in the middle of it all sat Yuna, a small furless creature who had fallen from the sky and found her home among the stars' most unlikely family. Taru leaned his head against her shoulder. "Will you tell us a story?" he asked. "A story about the sky people?" Yuna smiled and looked up at the stars. So far away now, but still beautiful. "Once," she began, "there was a people who had no claws, no fangs, no fur to keep them warm. They were weak and soft, and every creature in their world was stronger than they were." The pack leaned in, listening. "But they learned," Yuna continued. "They learned to think, to build, to adapt. They learned that strength is not just about muscles and claws. It is about heart, about family, about the willingness to help those who need help and protect those who need protection." She looked around at the faces lit by firelight, the amber eyes watching her with love and trust. "And sometimes," she said softly, "when one of them is very, very lucky, they find a new family among the stars. A family that teaches them what it truly means to belong." She fell silent. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, an ice wind howled. Taru pressed closer against her side. "I am glad you stayed," he said quietly. Yuna put her arm around him and held him close. "So am I," she whispered. "So am I." And in the cold darkness of a world far from Earth, surrounded by aliens who had become her family, Dr. Yuna Kim finally understood what it meant to be home.